Welcome to the Best Practices in Reading training video. This video will provide you with an in-depth view of the Best Practices product. You will have an opportunity to view important details and highlights of the Student and Teachers Edition. Best Practices in Reading is a supplemental reading program for grades 1 through 8 and gives an in-depth view of key reading strategies. This product can be used in a variety of settings within the classroom, as well as extended day and summer school. Best Practices focuses on reading comprehension strategies that tend to be the most essential for students, but they are also the most challenging. The Student Edition includes a pre-test and a post-test, so the teacher can gauge student progress and comprehension. Best Practices is also helpful when transitioning to the Common Core State Standards because it promotes critical thinking with open-ended questions and graphic organizers throughout. What better way to learn about this product than to take a detailed look at the pages in the Student Edition? It may be helpful for you to follow along and make notes in your own copy of a Best Practices in Reading book. You may also want to pause or go back to review the callouts on each slide. In this video, we will review a Level D or a Grade 4 book. However, the format and layout of each level or each grade is the same. Best Practices in Reading is built around comparing fiction and nonfiction text. Looking at the table of contents, you'll notice that each lesson is focused on a certain strategy, such as questioning, understanding genre, visualizing, and more. The fiction and nonfiction text for each strategy also share the same topic. For example, the topic of Lesson 1 is bats. The point of this is so students can compare the text across the strategy, the topic, and the genre. Every fiction and nonfiction text begins with the Getting Ready. The Getting Ready section is to help students get used to using the best known practices while they are reading, hence the name of the program. Students will spend a little time thinking about the genre and the topic of the text, as well as preview and predict what will happen within the text. The great thing about this program is that it can be done independently by students or teacher guided, all depending on the level of support the student needs. Now we're looking at the first fiction text. In the top left, it will list the strategies that are covered in the text and provide an example of each of these strategies throughout the text. Sections around the text give the student a model of how to correctly apply the strategy and will also help them to self-monitor as they read. The text will always highlight vocabulary words throughout the passage, and in the fiction text, these are typically Tier 2 words. So the concept of the word is not necessarily new to the student, but this may be a more sophisticated word for a definition they are already familiar with. Once the student is finished reading the fiction selection, they come to a graphic organizer. In this case, the students are asked to identify the parts of a story. Other fiction stories may have them identify sequence or understand characters. This gets the students interacting with the text and requires them to break down what happened in the story and show comprehension of what they read. On the last page of every fiction lesson, the students are asked to summarize and identify details from the text. These are huge comprehension strategies that will help the students to be able to recall what they read and understand what details from the story may be more important than others, to ensure they are focusing on the correct parts of the text. Again, this is a great connection to the Common Core. We just reviewed a fiction lesson, but if you remember, each lesson in Best Practices has a fiction text and a nonfiction text, so the students can compare each strategy across two different genres. Let's go ahead and take a look at the nonfiction lesson. This lesson is organized the same way as the fiction lesson, and on slide 4 we reviewed the Getting Ready page of this lesson. As we get into the nonfiction text, you'll notice the list of comprehension strategies that this text will focus on, along with the model prompt for the student and self-monitoring. In the fiction text, we talked about Tier 2 words that were included in the text. In the nonfiction text, the students will be exposed to Tier 3 words, which are academic language words specific to the understanding of the selected text and topic. These words are not necessarily words students would come across often. Throughout the nonfiction text, you'll also see the features that are common to nonfiction text outside of student textbooks. You'll see captions, timelines, charts, photographs, and diagrams. The Common Core will require students to review a picture or diagram that is not in the text, and they will have to pull information from the diagram as well as from their reading and put them together to really understand the concept being taught. Once the student is finished reading the nonfiction selection, they again come to a graphic organizer. In this case, the students are asked to identify details within the selection. Other nonfiction selections may have them compare and contrast or identify problem and solution. This gets the students interacting with the text and requires them to break down what happened in the story and show comprehension of what they read. Just like with the fiction lesson, the last page of the nonfiction lesson asks the students to summarize and identify details from the text with open-ended questions so the students can show their level of comprehension. The next 2 pages of the lesson will have the students make connections between the fiction and nonfiction text. This is a key feature in the Best Practices of Reading program, and it reinforces an important comprehension strategy that students will inevitably use throughout their reading future. For example, the students are asked to write details about bats that are included in both the folktale and the article. The students will get 2 points of view for each topic and make connections between them. They will have to use their comprehension of what they read to infer and make conclusions about the 2 texts. Finally, at the end of the lesson, the students have a writing activity. For example, here they are asked to write a persuasive letter related to the theme of the lesson, which is bats. The students are expected to do some research, and they are given space and tools to plan their research for the writing exercise. We just reviewed the first lesson of the Level D Best Practices in Reading Student Edition. The format of the rest of the lessons in this level and all other levels for grades 1 through 8 will be the same. Let's take a look at the supporting Teacher's Guide for Best Practices. The Teacher's Guide includes a program overview and breakdown of the best practices structure, with tips on how to best use the program within the classroom. Teachers also receive lesson-by-lesson support and professional development for differentiated instruction, lesson plan structures, and more. The lesson-by-lesson support in the Teacher's Guide is structured the same way as the Student Edition, in that we start with the fiction, move to the nonfiction, and then pull it all together and make connections between the 2. For both the fiction and nonfiction, we start with the comprehension strategies and skills that will be covered in the lesson. Then there is an introduction to the strategy focus for the lesson and a modeling passage so the teachers can instruct the strategy within the context of a passage and not in isolation. This modeling passage for each lesson can be found as an e-resource on optionspublishing.com. Then the Teacher's Edition breaks down the lesson into 3 steps to go along with the structure of the student lesson. The teachers help the students to get ready before reading, guide their comprehension while reading, and then review and confirm their predictions after reading. Looking at the nonfiction passage within the Teacher's Guide, you'll notice that the Teacher's Guide information is the same structure as the fiction passage, with all the same components. You'll see identifying comprehension skills and strategies, introduction with the modeling passage, getting ready, guiding comprehension, and support for after reading. The lesson finishes with the teacher guidance for making connections between the fiction and nonfiction, with additional support for the writing exercise students are asked to do at the end of each lesson. At the back of the teacher's guide, there are additional resources for the teacher to use with the students, such as a homework page for each lesson, a writing rubric so the teacher can have a guide to grade the student writing activities, and a graphic organizer for the students to use when they are putting together their writing. We just reviewed the Student Edition and Teacher's Guide for best practices in reading. We hope you have learned how the structure and layout of best practices can work as a supplemental reading program for the whole class, pull-out groups, extended day, or summer school in grades 1 through 8. We appreciate you taking the time to learn about best practices in reading. For more information about this product and to review the books for all grades, visit triumphlearning.com and select your state.